uh, on a wagon pulled by a horse. And they put it together on the west side of town in a pasture. And they took off and circled around one time and crashed on the landing. So that was the end of the airplane for the lighting of the White Way. They put it on a wagon and took off with it again. And then as time went, there had several places, about, 1918, there was a fella here in town that was a blacksmith. And some people, or an airplane came in and landed, and they needed a mechanic. So they called a guy, Solon Clark, and the airplane mechanic was a blacksmith. And so he did some work on the airplane for them, and they took off with it and left. And then as time went, there were sporadic airplanes. The first multi-engine airplane that was around was a Ford tri-motor. And people don't realize it, but years ago, Depot Street down here where Co-op is, that was the end of town. There wasn't anything east of that. And so this tri-motor landed there, and nobody knows really why it landed there, and then took off. And after that, there was just airplanes here, there, and yonder. Some of them landed down there on the river bottom. Some of them landed, you remember old Joe Gross down there? He had a farm on the southeast corner of town. People landed in that field, and just one thing led to another. And there just wasn't an airport in Maryville officially until about 1940. And that was one of those things where World War II, they could see it coming. And one thing led to another. And Norval Saylor, who was a mathematics instructor here in the State Teachers College at that time, was over at Tarkio, and they had a civil pilot training program over there. And the reason they had it was that it had a kind of an emergency strip along the airways from Kansas City up to Omaha. And it was just a kind of a small field that if anything went wrong, they were to land there and get it fixed and then go on. Then while he was there, he found out they were moving a CPT program in there, civil pilot training. And so he came back to Maryville and got with the college officials and said, hey, here's a deal where we can maybe come up on this thing. We'll get one of these CPT programs and put it in a field. M.O. Anderson, who was the manager, I guess, of the old-time milk plant that was here in Maryville, he owned a pasture down here where we are now. They built in 2 weeks, and this is fast for government, but in 2 weeks, Saylor went to Kansas City, talked to the government officials that were in on this program, and in 2 weeks they had a program set up and started here at the college in Maryville. And there's a lot of records in the university there on this stuff. The CPT program in June, I think it was, of 1940, they had the program started up there. The first airplane they had was an Aeronca TF. And the T stood for trainer and the F stood for a Franklin engine. And if you had a Continental engine, you had a TC model. But they got a building put up there, and Doug, I think you're the one that sent me a picture of it. The first building down there. But they had their first building set up, and they brought in a fellow by the name of Ed Schultz as the flight instructor. And I understand he was a pretty good instructor. He had about 7 or 8 students on the CPT program, and they flew off the field down there, about 3/4 of a mile south of the water plant. And that's where we are now. in this program, Schultz was the chief flight instructor, the manager, a little bit of everything. And then as it went on, they brought in more aircraft. They had like 4 Porterfields and 2 Howard DGA 18s and a Stinson SR and just various aircraft. And the program seemed to work real well. It went on, and the ground school part of it was taught in the at that time, State Teachers College. And when it started down there, it had Ed Schultz as chief instructor. Sid Englehart, I think they said, was the first mechanic that was down there. They got their building started, they run the program and seemed to have pretty good luck with it. And people, it's kind of a long story, but one time there was a guy drove up in our parking lot down there, and he just sat there for a long time. Finally, I went out and asked him if I could help him, you know. And he wanted to know if I'd ever heard of this Ed Schultz that was the chief instructor. And I said, yeah, I've got a picture of him in there on the wall. And he went inside, and all at once he kind of choked up and everything, and he said that was my dad. And his dad was kind of a rascal. And one of the things was that he just kind of he just ornery all the way around. And he wound up shooting one of the Maryville City policemen. And that didn't go over too good, and they were going to send him away. And he had somebody interested, you know, that kind of took care of him and everything. And by the way, just before he came to Maryville, he got out of the Leavenworth Penitentiary. That's one of those deals. He seemed to have got himself in a little bit of trouble in the military. Took an airplane without permission. One thing led to another, and did a couple other bad things, and so they sentenced him to life in Leavenworth. Well, some way he got met some gal in this deal, and she got him sprung out of Leavenworth. And then he came to Maryville as the chief flight instructor. He had been a Navy or a Marine pilot in World War I. It's just kind of one of those stories, you know, and then he messed around here in town and a few things. He shot a policeman. They were going to send him then to Jeff City for a vacation. But somewhere or another, he got himself into the Army Air Force, and that got him out of going to prison down here. And so they sent him to China. And while he was in China, in a combat-related situation, he was killed in action. So that was the end of him. But Ed Jr. finally got hold of a bunch of people and got some newspaper articles and stuff like that and put them together for me. And it's kind of interesting what this guy did, you know. He was totally different. But, oh yeah, in Leavenworth, Ed got some copies of the information on his dad while he was in Leavenworth, and they were writing some kind of an interchange in the prison there, and one of the notes was, "Be careful of this guy. He is the worst offender of the regulations we've ever had." So it must have been a little. Yeah. But it was kind of interesting that way. The CPT program lasted from June, I think, I can't remember the exact date, but 1940, and it was closed out due to some flooding in that area in 1943, but the airport still existed clear up until about 47, along in there. Then the World War II was going pretty strong then. But then it came along there about 1945. The city built the airport here. And it's been highly modified since it was built. I don't know how many of you people realize what went on, but it had an X out here, northwest, southeast, southwest, northeast, north-south, east-west, everything. And then eventually they closed them up to just the concrete strip you've got here now. And kind of a sad thing, because it sure was nice for people with light aircraft to have runways into the wind all the time. In 1945, approximate, they built this, and it was dedicated in, I think it was 46. And the dedication was really quite a deal. Jess Taylor, who had grown up in this area, but Jess Taylor, one of the local people, was the commander of the U.S. Navy Reserves in St. Louis. So for the dedication, they had some TBM torpedo bombers and a few other things all show up here. And it had rained not too long before the dedication ceremony. And unfortunately, some of the TBMs and stuff sunk into the mud about that deep. So they had to kind of wait until it dried up a little to come get their airplanes back out of here. The first operator career was what they call Maryville Flying School. And then after it was running for a short time, they incorporated into Aviation Services Incorporated. And the first manager was a fellow named Dick Nolan. And he was an ex-Navy pilot. And David White, which I'm sure a lot of you people remember, was the chief flight instructor. And Bert Volker was the head of the shop out here. The Nolan stayed for about 2 years, and then David White took over as the manager and run the aviation services. There were various flight instructors. When I came out here, I was in high school in about 1946, along in there, and they made a line boy out of me. So I got to push the Cubs and wash them and a few other things. Man, I thought that was great and enjoyed that. But as time went, why, at one time we had, if I remember right, it was 15 aircraft in a flight training program. And the program was more or less sponsored for the GI Bill. And everybody that wanted to learn to fly just sign up, and you know, the government paid 100%. Can't beat that. And we had a Stearman, a BT-13, Vultee, Cubs, Air Coops. And the Air Coop was a good little airplane, but it had one problem. It had an anti-stall ring on the column, and you had to be careful how you landed it, because if you were too high and pulled the wheel back and got too slow, it would automatically go into a glide, called an anti-stall ring. And they bought the Air Coop, and the first week they had them, they knocked the nose wheel off one, and the second week they knocked the nose wheel off the other one. And so they brought them into the shop, and they rebuilt one, and they put it out of the shop about noon on Saturday. Monday morning they had it back, needing another nose wheel. And so they got kind of instead of being called an Air Coop, everybody called them a scare coop. And they got kind of a bad name, which was undeserved. And then finally they smartened up, took the anti-stall rings off of them, and it just told everybody, says, you know, you can't level off 50 feet in the air and just think it's going to land, because that isn't going to happen. Yeah, but they were good airplanes. Lose my train of thought here as to where I was going. But at any rate, some of the people that were involved in that, me being the youngest one in high school, they kind of picked on me a little bit. And one of the things I thought was extremely funny, and I remember to this day, was a guy, Doyle Young and Joe Juvenile. And they set up a deal, and I was in one room and they were in another one, and they had a magneto, 27,000 volts. And they set it all up so that when I took hold of this metal doorknob, they were gonna click the impulse, and I was gonna get that shot up my arm. And the only trouble was it backfired and went back and got both of them. I just thought that was unfair.
Well, was a mechanic and,
Yeah.
Juvenile was a flight instructor.
No, Juvenile was also a
Was he
mechanic.
mechanic or he was flight instructor?
No, he was a
All right, well, you
mechanic.
gotta tell about all those guys, those flight instructors name here.
Oh, yeah, David
That's
White.
not many notes, guys. You won't read them.
David White was the chief flight instructor, and then we had others. There was Joe Piper and Richard McDougall. He, I think, was going to college out here, but he'd been a Air Force pilot, and so he was trying to instruct and this and that. Gosh, I can't remember how many of them are around there, but there was quite a few. As time went, there was a lot of various operators. Aviation services were there. Then when they closed up, Terry Wooster, a young man from up in Iowa, he came in. And let's see, forgotten Terry.
Marion Worth.
Yeah, Marion Worth was in there, a fellow from Kansas City. And he didn't stay too long because I think it was the first year he was here. We had one of those snows about that deep, and he didn't like that. So he went to Arizona. Yeah. And Jim Cox, one of the people, I think somebody would be able to tell bad things on him, right? But,
Ray Bartels,
yeah, Ray Bartels, there was quite a few of them.
Noel Jervis.
Yeah,
I'm all listed there, baby.
yeah. But this is where I should start reading this. Any of you guys remember things that went on here? Or? There was a lot of different things that went on. Just had the steerman there that was a aerobatic trainer for this GI Bill business. And one of the people here in town took it and went to a flight breakfast at Elmo. Well, that turned out to be an exciting flight breakfast up there because they had 3 accidents that day. One of them was kind of funny because the steerman was trying to take off and he hit a mud puddle. It had rained not too long before the flight breakfast. And he was coming up to the wires, or telephone wires, pulled up, he just cleared the wires and he stalled and started settling. And there was a wooden shed there, kind of a pole shed, probably 10 by 10. He hit that sucker dead on and the shed splattered and the steerman stopped. And then the 2 guys in the steerman got out without any scratches or anything and had good safety harness in it. And as they were walking back through, one of the passenger caught his ripcord on his parachute, and the wind was just strong enough, out came the parachute. And so they had parachutes, wrecked airplanes, a few other things around there, and I think it was Elman Davidson up at Claremont was over there to the flight breakfast. And his 170 quit on takeoff, and he landed on the railroad track. And by on the railroad track, I mean that the gear was just wide enough that the left and the right gear went just on the outside of the tracks, and he'd come to a jarring halt out there. And so they weren't quite sure why he run out of gas, but that's what happened. And so they finally got it off of the track, all fired up and everything. And then it was not much longer than that, another guy, I've forgotten exactly what he did, but anyhow, he banged his airplane up a little bit. So that was an exciting flight breakfast for people. One thing led to another.
Tell them about the fun things you used to do that we can't do anymore.
Yeah, well, how many of you guys seen a balloon bust? Not many?
Yeah, you have to take a blue bus. We used to do them all the time.
You take a balloon and in a Cub or whatever you were flying, and you blow it up as big as you could get it, and usually you want a nice red one or yellow or something that'd be easy to see. You'd take off and fly out over the crowd and push the balloon out, and then you had to get turned around and go back and find it, and if you could find that balloon, break it with your prop. Why, you know, sometimes you get a prize for it. It was kind of funny because occasionally the spacing would be such on the thing, the balloon would come through the propeller arc and bounce off the windshield, and then you got to go home the second time. And kind of an interesting deal. Kind of hard to understand, or, you know, you just can't understand some people's way of exciting themselves. But you ever see one of these deals where they take a J3 Cub, take off, two people, the guy in the back seat would fly the airplane, turn the switch off, stall it till the prop quit turning. The guy in the front seat would climb out of the airplane, hang onto the frame with his foot wedged in between the wheel and the strut, lean forward, and prop it, and then get back in the airplane. Does that sound like fun to anybody? I've seen that done quite a few times. And there's a picture on my wall down there of a guy hanging out of a Cub like that. And
We have a lot of aviation pictures down there, guys, of people and things that you ought to see sometime. We're gonna have to build a room just to put pictures up. He's loaded down there. And he knows the story behind them all, I don't.
yeah, it's just kind of interesting that,
Tell him about the guy's Cub, was it the Cub where he shot his prop off or something?
oh, yeah, Walkup used to be in co-op or something many years ago. You know, coyote hunting from an airplane? Yeah, big deal. And funny stories about that too. But anyhow, the guy they were out coyote hunting, and of all things, whoever the gunner was in the back seat come around far enough that he was shooting through the propeller arc, and he actually shot this metal propeller, and one took it off and sent it into Sansonage, I think it was, and they were going to straighten it. And they actually called and said, what in the world happened to this prop? Because where the shell hit it, the blast, the propeller came out, had a nice U-turn in it, and then went on. And they couldn't understand how that got done. Nobody else can either.
Tell him about I think it was a 140 landed out here with his tail dragging one it welded.
Oh, yeah. Now, you gotta figure, that was a lesson.
Okay, I knew it was something of that order.
But guy comes in, lands, and the tail, right in front of the stabilizer on a Luscombe AD, just flat broke off, you know. And instead of being really upset about it, he jumps out and comes running up in and wants the mechanic. And we said, well, we can go out there and help you. And he said, no, he said, I need a mechanic. He said, I need that tail welded back on so I can go on. an aluminum airplane, you don't really weld the tail back on. But there's a lot of strange things. We had other things that happened. Saw a beach bonanza coming downwind. And he throttled back and he was turning to land to the north out here when we had that little blacktop runway. And the closer he got, it started looking suspicious because you don't buzz somebody with flaps down. And as he turned, he'd come around, you could see the flaps down, but there were no wheels. And so I kind of figured out that maybe he didn't realize his gear was not down. So I took off running, and this used to be the kind of a park out here. And I got about halfway to the runway out there, and he had one of these wooden B-200 Beechcraft propellers on it. And just as he got down about to land with his wheels up, I think he realized it, and he started bringing his power up. And then it was just a big shower of pieces of wood. This was an old wooden prop with plastic coating. And he started shaving that off on the ground, went right on down and landed. And, you know, that's quite a sight. And had another guy come in one time. They had plowed the snow off the runway, and they left it a little bit drifted on the east side. And he landed, got a little too far over, flopped over upside down in the snow there, and got out and walked around his airplane. His boy said, "I hope I didn't break my radio antenna off, that little wooden stick on top," you know. And so he was more worried about that little wooden radio antenna than he was about having his airplane upside down on the ground.
Well, while you're telling about that, tell them about the guy from Arizona that landed upside down over there with all his stuff.
Oh,
Remember you and him
yeah,
over there?
the old,
I can't remember his name.
I can't remember his name now. But she answered the phone one day when we were operating this airport, and somebody said, "Help." And she said, "What?" And he said, "Help." And she tried to talk to him, and he had had an accident over here by Stanbury, and he needed somebody to come help him. So we drove over there. Harold Poppy and myself went over there.
Took Luther's car.
Hmm?
Took Luther Belcher's car.
Well, I've forgotten exactly. But anyhow, somewhere or another, we got over there and hunted the guy down. And here was his Luscombe airplane out there. And it had been raining. It was just muddy as all get out. And the ground was so soft that he had touched down and sunk in, and the wheel pants went back and touched the wheels, which was like locking the brakes up. And the second time he went over upside down. And he wound up upside down, and the airplane was laying flat because about that much of the vertical fin was stuck in the ground. And that was just holding it upside down. We actually turned it back over, and would you believe the only damage to that airplane, the ground was so soft it didn't even bend the top of that rudder when it went in. And when we turned it back over and everything, the only damage was that when he took his seatbelt off, he stepped in his skylight and broke it. And then he wanted all the stuff out of it. So an Olds 88, and we took so much stuff out of that we filled the trunk of that Olds 88. And how he got that in there, I'll never understand.
He came from Arizona, and he'd fly back here several times a year, and he'd always get great big, I don't know why, he'd fly back, get all this popcorn in great big jars. And he'd always bring us a big jar of popcorn before he went home every year after that.
Yeah.
So he did that for years and years and years.
Yeah. And the interesting part was that, what's it say about using charts, you know, to fly? He had come from White Bear or something like that in Arizona to his little ex-farm up here in Iowa using standard road maps. He had missed a turn somewhere on his road map and run out of gas because he didn't get where he thought he was going to go.
Also, remember back there when CP down there, CP train down there, Ed Schultz and a guy named Sterling Ross. And was he from Ravenwood, you said? I think
Yeah, Ross was.
We're the only two that didn't come back, but they
Yeah,
didn't come
they
back.
had,
They lost. There was a large group, we have pictures of those CPA, CPT trained, groups down there. And they even had a girl in one of them, didn't they?
yeah,
I think they had a girl in one of them.
yeah,
Fishing that way.
the original, class did have one girl in it.
They trained 250 to 300 pilots in it. So it was pretty, good class there. And also, you told me the first Army airplane cost, I put down something, you said 30, because I wrote it wrong.
First airplane that was sold to the Army, by the Wrights was, $30,000. And that's pretty cheap compared to what they're paying for them now. Yeah. Anything else in there?
Well, you did we put down some of the airplane owners, and I don't have them all, but just a few of them, remember, that had airplanes around here. We were kind of what we were out here at the airport.
Some of you guys that live down there toward, Graham and Maitland and so on, there was a lot of activity down there. Saul Christian, used to be Christian Implement down there. And Elvin, his brother, they owned a Beach Bonanza. Hugh Lyle lived out there east of Graham. He had a J3 Cub. Yeah, Harry Music used to be down there. He had a Stetson. Tommy Russell had a Cessna 120 or 140, I've forgotten which. But there was a lot of them down there.
He went from down there, but Alan Davidson and Mickey Ellis and Melvin Talley. There's lots more of those just popped in our mind.
Let's see, this coyote hunting business, that was quite a sport. I tried that once myself, but the coyote got away from me. But one thing.
Here and everybody else does that too. All big gets away from him.
Yeah, but at least I didn't shoot the end off the prop. That coyote was an animal, and I swear that thing must have been hunted before, because we saw him in this field just off the south side of the airport here, across the highway. And me and another guy took a cub, and he did the flying, and I was gonna do the shooting. And that coyote, every time you get right up to him, he'd run under the airplane. And there's no way you could get turned around there to shoot him. And we made about 3 passes on him, and he kept running under the airplane and finally got into a little patch of timber, and that's the last we saw of him. But we had a lot of fun chasing him.
Who was it that used to give the control tower spits in St. Joe? I forget
Oh,
which one of the guys
yeah.
it was. One of those guys down there.
Yeah, I think that was Harry.
Tommy? Harry? Was it Harry?
I think it was
It
Harry.
was Harry.
But he told me one time, he said when he went to Kansas City, he said, I never had any trouble getting in down there. He said, they just take me straight in. And I said, well, you're supposed to circle this, that, and something else, and was talking to him. He said, well, it's easy. He said, when you start down there, he said, you get in the air, when you get close enough, you just call him up and say, hey, Tower, this is me, Harry. And said, first thing you know, he said, you just keep talking to him that way, and this and that. And he said, boy, said, they just take you right straight in and land you. Yeah, some of the funnier stuff. There was a fellow on the coyote hunting. He wanted to use a revolver to shoot his coyotes, and he knew he was going to have to practice. So he put a 5-gallon can up here in the Nottoway River, close to Claremont, and he would go out there and fly down between the banks and by himself, and he had the airplane trimmed, so he just hit the power and it'd go slightly nose up. He could lean out and go bang, bang, bang at that can, trying to learn to hit it so he could shoot coyotes. Well, he got down in there one day, and just as he leaned out, the engine quit. And so he managed to wind up in the river, upside down. All his friends came over and helped him, turned it back over, took it up, put it on a little sandbar. And then they waited about 3 weeks for one heck of a wind out of the south, and he flew it off that little sandbar and brought it down here for a few repairs. You know, like the top of the rudder, the top of the cabin, the wingtip, a few other things. But,
And there was something about, students teaching students.
oh,
I
yeah.
forgot about that. I don't want to speak about it.
Yeah, don't need to give names, you know, but it was kind of a funny deal. Some years back, when the CPT was down there on our, or flying off our place down there, the guy, he would come over and he was a student, and he would rent an airplane from this CPT deal. And then he'd go over here just a few miles, land in a pasture, and a buddy of his, he would teach him to fly. So here's a student teaching a student. One thing leads to another. The fellow who was getting the instruction from the first student, he eventually wound up buying his own airplane and moving up near Bedford. And he was just enjoying life. He was taking people rides, charging them, this, that, something else. And then as time went, there was a student from Bedford was driving down, taking instruction from us, and then going back. One day he comes in and he says, you know, he says, I can save 60 miles of driving because Bill said that he's going to teach me to fly. And yeah, Bill who? And he told me. I said, well, if that's what you think you want to do, well, a couple of weeks later he shows up and he says, I can't get him to sign my logbook for all this flying. And I said, well, next time you go home, I said, when he comes up, ask him to see his pilot's license and his instructor's rating and all this stuff. Well, as time went, you know, another week or so, the kid's back down here, he don't have a license. And so, but,
He flew all his life out like
yeah, that guy,
a lot of years.
yeah, he flew for many years, and he could tell more stories about flying. And we all know that a carbureted engine won't run upside down, right? Float don't go right on the carburetor. But anyhow, he was telling some people one time, and he was out giving some guy a ride or something, and he said they were flying around, said they got in the clouds, and said, we were just flying along there having fun. Said, finally the passenger said, Bill, said, I don't think we're right side up. Said, I feel like I'm just hanging in the harness. And old Bill says, I took a pin out of my pocket and turned loose of it and said, damn, fell up the skylight. And one thing led to another, and then he says, you know, he said, I flew around a little bit, and he said, I finally turned over, said, just as I got level, said, I popped out of the clouds, and by gosh, there was a courthouse steeple right in front of us. And that's Bedford.
Also, on the wall down there is a pilot certificate signed by Orville Wright. Ray Shankins at Clarendon, his pilot certificate signed by Orville Wright. He gave us, we got that certificate down there with a picture of him, and he gave us the whole kit and caboodle.
What was that guy's name?
Ray Shankins.
Up at Florida.
He was at Clarendon, and he was a really nasty person. He
Yeah.
used to come down and stand on his hands when he was, I think, 90 years old, down and come see us and run around on his hands. And the sheriff came in one time and, you can talk about that.
Yeah. Well, a state trooper, and he was taking lessons from us. And he pulled in, old Ray was sitting in a chair right there by the door. And the cop starts up to port, and he jumped up, don't shoot, don't shoot. And he starts backing up, and I'm like, what the hell's going on there?
He said, I'll marry her, I'll marry her.
Yeah. And as he got back about 10 steps, he said, well, says, if you insist, I'll marry her. You know.
He must have been 80 years old. He was hard.
He was a different cat.
He was on fire.
And what else we got?
Oh, the only other thing we didn't mention was the flying club we had out here. The first one, which was
Nottaway.
Nottaway, and then the American Flying Club that Kevin and them had out here.
Yeah, Nottaway Flying Club. That was just a group of people. Weren't you in that one? Bob? Huh?
You mean with the main drivers and all? that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I thought you were.
Couple guys from Stanbury.
Yeah.
It's my mind right now, James somebody.
Scary part, those guys are all dead.
It shows you how to
Joe, how old are you?
How old am I?
Yeah.
40. Times 2.
That's two. He just turned 80 in November.
Did you guys know a Delbert Rhine?
Delbert?
Yeah, Delbert Rhine.
No, not right off, no.
He learned how to fly around here in the 40s.
In the 40s? Yeah. There's quite a few that learned to fly, and out of there's no exact number on the pilots there, but they think it was somewhere between 250 and 300, and there was only 2 that didn't come back from the war. I thought that was a very good record.
You was telling about Ray Shank, I used to live up there, Kringland, and you talk about kite hunting out over the bottom there, man. There's pictures, you've probably seen them, old Ray had all the skins of them things he shot,
Yeah.
wearing that clear across the wings of his plane. And his boy